Hey, I'm Pastor Rhonda.
And I'm Pastor Seth.
You're listening to Growing Hope.
Living Faith. Well, thanks for sticking with us so far, everyone. We're so glad that you have made it this far. This is going to be probably a little bit more of an update of really what's going on, right here and right now, ministry-wise for Roger, and it's awesome stuff. And I hope you can catch a vision somehow in some way. Just of man, what does it mean to be present, and how do we just kind of see the people in front of us and be agents of change, and be a people who make a difference in the world around us. And so, man, pray and hope that you enjoy this last part of our interview with Roger Kittle, and let's get to the action. So you have this move toward discipleship. You're now in Farmington, New Mexico, on the reservation. Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about the reservation. What is life like on the reservation? I know a lot of people probably don't really realize that there's heavy poverty. Deep poverty on the reservation. It's almost third world country here in America. Yeah. People just don't even realize sometimes. But talk to us a little bit about that, and then how have you managed to bring this discipleship model now onto the reservation?
Wow. Okay.
Big question.
Yeah, big question, and that's okay. I'm a preacher. I can talk a lot, So if my wife is here, she'd say, "You want the Reader's Digest version, or do you want the preacher's version?" Well,
you share what's on your heart, baby.
But she's not here, so that's right. Okay. We live on the property of Four Corners Home for Children, and when we came there, we call ourselves for years resident volunteers, meaning we live on property and we're not being paid. God's brought us there to volunteer our time. We moved there finally, knowing that we could rent a house from them. And but when we were getting ready to move, one thing, we're already turned in a 6-month notice. We're probably 2 months away from moving, and we're sitting on the couch one night, and I'm like, okay, we're about to make a move. I'm quitting my job. Carol's quitting her job, which is good money, and we have no promise of income. We didn't try to raise support like missionaries do, which is great for some, but we felt like we weren't supposed to, and I didn't understand that. And so I'm like, okay, Lord, how are we going to live once we get there? And we're sitting there, and it was just like a light went on, and it's like, I looked at Carol and I said, "We're turning 62." And I said, we're just going to draw Social Security early. So that's the foundation of money that we kind of live off of. And there's other things happening, but our church at St. Elmo gave us almost a year's salary, which shocked us, and had no clue that could even be a possibility, but it did. And through that, the money's still here in Chattanooga, and they're hanging on to that, and they pay our rent, and people we've never asked anybody for a dime for us. If you want to send something to the children's home, Four Corners Home for Children, make the check out to them, and that's great. We want that supported. And because they don't take government money, and they have their own school there, and over 2,000 Navajo kids have lived there since the year I was born in 1953, and anyway, for 72 years. So all of that, we've never asked anybody for a dime. And so we go out there with this money that our rent's being paid, and they have a cook that cooks meals for the kids and any staff that lives on property. And so like 4 nights a week, we get our supper, and it's always enough food for the lunch. I'm like, well, we got a roof over our head, and we ain't going to starve to death. So we're good. And so, and over the years, I've helped with maintenance things, and, digging ditches or painting a wall, and we're both qualified to stay overnight with the kids, been fingerprinted, background check, even to just live there. We had all that done. And we're qualified to, if a house parents are on vacation or sick or something, that, and many nights we've done that, stay with the children as their house parent. And so we love that. Carol she does art classes with the kids. They have their own school there on property, and I do music, guitar, teach them. God blessed us. Somebody sent us enough money to buy a baritone ukulele for every child. And that's the same tuning as a guitar, the bottom 4 strings. And so transition to guitar after that if you want to. But anyway, we just love interacting with them and doing things like that. And like I said, Carol's helped in the office, and they pay her a little money for doing that when she does. And I'll help with maintenance. But going back this time, we've been gone for 2 months, and really want to focus on, well, there's actually several things, and I won't mention that just now, but we love what we're doing, not pastoring anymore. One of the biggest needs, we have Celebrate Recovery on Tuesday nights in one of the front buildings there at the highway, and 20 to 30 people are there on Tuesday evenings. Chuck Reish is the director of Navajo Nation Outreach, which he's trying to meet every pastor on the reservation. The Navajo Reservation is the size of the state of West Virginia. It's the largest reservation in America. 2/3 of it is in Arizona. Almost a third is in New Mexico. We're at the upper northern range of that. And then a little sliver goes up into Utah. And I think it's like 190,000 people who live on the reservation that they know about, being Navajo people. And Pastor Chuck Reish is seeking to meet every pastor and find out what are their needs. And the ones we're meeting now, one of the things we're finding out is some of them are my age and older, and they're concerned who's going to take over their church. And it might be a little hogan out in the middle of nowhere, and there might be 10 people sitting there with him, and that's his church, and praise God for it. And so there's no Bible training or means of Bible training for younger folks, and so we're working with them and helping them any way we can, but we want them to come up with it and to do it, and we'll assist any way we can, because it'll mean more to them if they actually develop it. And but some kind of training, whether it's come to our place and do classes or somewhere else out there, or we do it on over the internet and things, but a lot of them don't have internet in those far-reaching places, but then maybe on DVDs and that kind of teaching stuff where we can get classes going and get some people, to take these churches over. But yeah, the poverty is horrendous. Before we ever went out there, I'd never been to a reservation, been to Cherokee, had my picture taken from a teepee and gave him $5.
Right.
Anyway, that's my experience. But we knew God was going to move us out there, and of course He connected us with those folks. But the poverty back here, everybody always said, well, they got the casinos, and there's, yeah. The Navajo Nation is one of the richest tribes because of casinos. Now, they were the last tribe to allow the casinos to be built. They saw the corruption around it in other tribes and places, and so they held out. But then watching other tribes across America with casinos, they started seeing the money, and it just got to where they finally said, okay. But what happened then, though, was the fact that the corruption that came from it. They're sending a little welfare check out monthly, but it's just pennies compared to the real dollars are going to the pockets of a few. I guess Navajo mafia is as real as anybody other kind of mafia kind of thing, that people, are just, they're corrupt, and they're degenerate, and greed is greed. I don't care who you are. And so there's families that don't have electricity. There's families out on the reservation that don't have running water. And there's a long story there with that, to how that our nation, our government, destroyed their well water. Back in the 40s, when we needed uranium for the bomb and the war effort, World War II, we strip mined the uranium off the reservations, and we didn't close up the mines, and we didn't clean up the mess. And now that has all run down into their well water, and so their water's radioactive. And so we destroyed it, and we've given them nothing since the 40s for that. And Navajo people are dying 4 times greater with cancer uranium than anybody else in the country. I mean, cancer's bad everywhere, but they're dying 4 times greater rate than anybody else as a result of what we did to them and continue to do. But, and just, I was so upset when we first got out there and started finding these political things and how we're doing them and, just, and I'm just tied in a knot. And like you said, that became a distraction to me. And I'm like, and finally just praying one day, and it's like God said, you got to let go of that. I didn't call you out here to change their political things and all the evil that we're doing. Y'all have done to them forever, and but one life at a time can come to know me, and that's why you're there. And so the idea, being there with the kids, we love that, interacting with them. They call us Mimi and Poppy because they heard our grandkids call us that one time, and so that just stuck with everybody. So people call us Mimi and Poppy. And so it's just a family feeling. We love being there. It's a little 16 acres. It's not real wide, but it goes long. And just having that property, if you just Google Four Corners Home for Children and look at the story behind that, how God gave a piece of property to them and then later gave another piece of property to them, and just to bless this whole thing that's been going on for 72 years. And, I feel assured that I'm either going to drop dead out there or Jesus is going to pull me up out of New Mexico someday. And that's home for us now. We sold our house back here, and people say, "Oh, y'all sacrificed so much." Now, look, we've done nothing. There is no sacrifice. When you got everything that happens in life, you've got to look at it through the grid of the cross. And when I don't care what kind of sacrifices our flesh thinks we've made, it's nothing compared to what Jesus did for us and the life that we have. Ephesians tells me that I was born dead in trespasses and sin. So I had no life, no spiritual life. I had physical life, but no spiritual life. And the only life that we have as believers, this is why discipleship is so critical. I wish somebody had said this to me 50, 60 years ago. And but that if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation. All the old things have passed away, and behold, all things have become new. And the very idea there that God has given to us the ministry of reconciliation, and he has given to us not just the ministry, but the word of reconciliation, which goes along with that same ministry, and that we are his ambassadors. And that, you want to read that, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 16, 17 through 21. And, that you want to know what your ministry is, there it is right there. Now, it's going to look different with everybody, and that's okay, but God has a ministry. We represent Jesus everywhere we go 24/7. There are no days off. And I wish somebody had said that to me when I was 10, when I come to know Jesus. Man, what you've just stepped into is an amazing life, and God will change you and change people around you. And but anyway, we're there. One of the things I'm dealing with, I'm not even going to Celebrate Recovery on Tuesday nights. I was doing that. Chuck Reese in charge of it, and when he would be gone, I would take it over. And God revealed to me that, you know what, you're 72. You're not going to be around here forever. And what Chuck needs to be doing is these men, we've got testimonies, 1 year sober, 2, 3, 5 years sober, and they love Jesus and they're learning about him. And I watched that if Pastor Chuck was gone and I would step in, then he's not duplicating himself. And so I stepped away because I saw 2 or 3 men there that he would really use. And I stepped back, and sure enough, 2 of those have really just are shining, man. And when he's gone, he don't have to worry. And these 2 guys are taking this over, and if he drops dead someday, and I do, it's going to continue on. That's what discipling is, that we're duplicating. So anyway, these things are happening. But the one thing that in the past, since I'm not pastoring and I'm trying to get away from doing maintenance stuff, and they're on the property just helping and whatever, I'll still do some stuff. But the guys on the street, when we first visited out there 12, 13 years ago now, first visit, I wake up and it was like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. My body was saying, hey, it's 7, 8 o'clock in the morning because they're 2 hours behind us. And so I would get up in the mornings and I'd walk up the 2-minute walk up to McDonald's and just go in at 6 o'clock when they open. I'd wait for them to open the door. I'd go in and I'd just sit down and have my Bible and just a notepad and just stuff, sitting there reading and looking and about daylight, these men started coming out of the bushes. And man, all of a sudden here's like 10, 20 people at times, and I'm like, wow. I thought they were all homeless. Started interacting with them. This was even on the visits, and I just started like, Lord, wow, here's a ministry right here. And at McDonald's at 7 o'clock in the morning, and so once we moved out there, I kept doing that. Now COVID ended all of it, and it just changed everything. And anyway, but just interacting with them, I've got a ponytail, and if people, obviously you can't see it, but anyway, and usually when I go to a church here and they've never met me before, and I'll get up to preach, and I say, well, let me answer the most important question. I said, what is a preacher from North Georgia doing with a ponytail? And God, and there's a long story with that, but the bottom line was God kind of led in not cutting my hair, and I didn't understand it at first, and it was the most aggravating thing I've ever done, and in my life, and it's thin, and it gets tangled and knotted, and I'm like, and before we ever moved out there, I was so frustrated one morning with this, and God had already led me to not cut my hair. I mean, I knew it was Him, and it's like craziest thing because preachers back here are looking at me like, what's wrong with you? You don't do that. You're a preacher. But anyway, one morning, frustrated with my hair, I just said, what am I doing? This is stupid. What I heard in my heart was, every time you're frustrated about your hair, remember to pray for the Navajo people. And I was like, wow, okay. And once we got moved out there, and I was spending time with guys in McDonald's and different places, and it just, I'd have 6 or 8 around. They had a big round table years ago. They don't have it anymore, but I'd have 6, 8 guys around that table, and we're talking. And if God led me, I'd buy coffee or a biscuit or something, but not always. Or I'd have a 50-mile line waiting for me every morning. But and just interacting with, and one of the guys said to me off to the side, he said, I noticed that my buddies here, that they seem to, they listen to you, and I listen to you. And I said, well, I hope so. I don't want to waste their time or mine. And I said, and he said, no. He said, we've had Belagana white preachers come in here over the years and see us out on the street and stop and talk to us. And he said, and they're all clean cut, and they're in their suits and ties, and they'll sit with us, and it always felt like they were talking down at us. And I'm like, wow, I would pray I would never do that. And he said, well, you don't, and and they know it. And he said, but part of it is your hair. And I said, whoa, what? No, what? and so obviously God led this. He said, these preachers in their suits and talking down at us and like we're poor savages. And he said, and anyway, and we didn't listen to them, but we're listening. And I thought, I said, first off, to God, I said, well, I'm never cutting my hair. So anyway, but just having that rapport with guys. And, but over the years, like I said, COVID stopped all of that at McDonald's, and they got kicked out at one point because they got too loud when I was out of town. And anyway, stuff happened. But, there's bukus of stories I could tell you about anyway, we won't go there. But dealing with guys now, thank God for the success stories of Celebrate Recovery in a year and 5 years sober and all of that. And But there's guys that, like I said, I thought they were homeless. And some of them are, but not, some of them aren't. Many of them aren't. I heard one guy saying one day, he said something about his sheep. And I'm like, wait a minute, where do you have sheep at? And he says, well, at my house. And I said, well, hold on. Just, I'm like dumbfounded. I'm like, okay, you've got sheep in a house. And he says something about his kids. And I'm like, so you got a wife? And he's like, yeah, and so many kids. And I'm like, where? And he said, like 35 miles out on the reservation. And I said, how long have you been here? And he said, this time? And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, this time. How long have you been here? And he stopped. He said, about a month. And I said, you've got a wife who obviously loves you because she hadn't knocked your head off. I mean, I'm just blunt with him. I'm like, if you keep this, you're going to die like this. You know that, don't you? Your family has died like this. And every one of them has kin that have. And I said, you got kids and a house and hogan, they lived in, and sheep. And I said, and you're here so you can drink in these bushes for a month. And they, yeah. And I'm like, they can't buy alcohol on the reservation. It's not sold. They can't buy it in town and take it back, or they'd really be in trouble if they got caught. So I've started interacting more and more with them, and we've been out here for 2 months now, and we got one of those Ring doorbells, and I can show you videos at 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, 4 o'clock in the morning. Somebody's ringing my doorbell, and there's, Roger, you in there? And I'm, in 3 days before we came out here this time. And I don't know how much time you need and stuff, but this has been the most amazing time ever coming out. In 10 years, we've been coming out every year. 3 days before we came out this time, I'd interacted with a couple of men. One's named Winston and the other one's Irving, Navajo gentleman, in 2 separate situations. And they needed shoes. They needed something to eat. And, we make sandwiches or whatever food we can get, and bottles of water and, Gatorades and whatever, we have, and clothes. And we didn't have shoes for Irving, but we had the next day, Winston needed shoes. And I said, well, I don't think there's any in there, but I'll go look. And what size you wear? And he told 11 and a half. And I went in there, and it wasn't there yesterday, but there was a brand new pair of black and white sneakers on the high top sneakers. And I said, God, if that's 11 and a half, I'm going to shout. And I picked it up, and, it was 11 and a half. And brand new, still had the stickers on it. I don't know who brought them, but anyway. And I took them back there, and I said, Winston, buddy, I said, you got to see how much God loves you here with this. I said, this is the only pair of shoes in there, and it's your size. And I had shirts for him, and just pants and things, and food and water and tears. Now, both these guys are already drinking, whatever time of day it is. And Winston, last thing he was saying to me, he said, in tears, he just said, how do I stop drinking? And I thought, Winston, buddy, we've had these conversations before. I've known him for 6-7 years, and I see him once every 2 or 3 months, 6 months, a year. Sometimes a year goes by and I don't see him. And I said, you're not even going to remember what I say to you tomorrow, are you? Nah, probably not. And I walked away that night, and I was walking home, and I'm just as human as anybody. And I literally said, God, I thank you for the success stories that celebrate recovery and people. But these guys, they won't come to that. And they won't come to church with me on Sunday. And they're always drinking when I'm dealing with them. And walking home across the parking lot, I just said, you know what, God, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to keep giving bottles of water and shoes and clothes and sandwiches to Winston and people like him. until he dies and goes to hell. I said, I'm done. I don't think my frustration was with God is that after 10 years I didn't have some way of sitting and giving them more than just pat on the back and a prayer and a bottle of water and a sandwich and now go on your way. And so went to sleep that night. The next morning I woke up and hadn't got out of bed yet, and about 4 o'clock in the morning I wake up and in my mind I didn't have a vision. I know God does that, and he could have done that if he wanted to, but I could see in my mind a 16-foot white cargo trailer. And you open one door and there's a private bathroom, just a toilet and a sink. You open another door and there's one shower, towels and everything that's needed. That would take up about half of the trailer, and the back half of it have one of the toy hauler ramp doors. The whole back comes down. But it's not a ramp. It would be a porch, a patio with legs under it, same level as the trailer. And what I envisioned was little round tables sitting there with some chairs. And when you look into the back of the trailer, about 6, 7, 8 feet deep, that here's a place where there'd be like a shelf, and there's water and there's coffee and there's sandwiches, food items and stuff. And I mean, something just really nice, not just something thrown together. But to be able to look at them and say, because one thing they've alluded to many times is people don't look them in the eye, they ignore them and turn the other way, obviously, because, they might be asking for change or whatever. And, I understand that. But that people won't, when they do say something to them, they won't look them in the face and look them in the eyes and talk. And so I would, like I said, I'm done. But then this vision of this, and, I got excited. I told Carol when she woke up and we talked about it. And she said, well, I could see, yeah. I even went and told the Navajo ministry, the president, and talking with her about it, I said, I just want to tell you this vision that I'm having of, I see this and a shower trailer and a place to feed and a place to say, look, here's not just sandwiches, now be on your way, but come up here and sit. And to begin to look them in the eye and to say, tell me about yourself. Tell me, where were you born? Who's your mom and dad? Who's, because these are men, this is somebody's son sitting here. And it's someone who was made in the image of God. And so anyway, I have this vision about this, and I made promises to the children's home. To her, I said, look, first off, I'm not parking it on the property. We're supposed to get we've been a grant given that we have to still deal with getting it. But anyway, to put up a big fence and an electronic gate where street folks don't just wander onto the children's home property. And that happens a lot, and we have to deal with it. And anyway, they sleep in the gazebo there in front of my house that we built some few years ago, and behind the dumpster and in the bushes. And anyway, and so I promised, I said, look, I'm not going, this is not going to be this is going to be on me. It's not going to be something that creates some liability. If they fail, somebody failed, they're not suing the children's home. And so that's my promise. And I said, and my other promise is this. It's however God does this, because number one, I don't have any money to make this happen. But, it's a God thing. And I said, as God does this, it won't be done on this property. And I won't do it until the gate and the fence is up. So, because I know it's going to attract more people if I do it on the other side of our property, and I'll get permission to do that over there. So anyway, I made that promise, and, we come out here this time, and I speak at different churches on Sundays and Wednesdays and in-home Bible studies and sitting in McDonald's and just talking to people, and preached a couple of times, and I didn't say anything about the trailer. I preached at a little church up here in Rossville a few weeks ago, and And they took up a little offering for me, and that helps pay for the gas getting here and everything. And so thank you. And they want me to come back that night and just tell us some stories like you're putting up with this morning. And anyway, and about stuff that's happened and what's going on. And I hadn't said a word about the trailer. And I shared that night just stories and success and people, celebrate recovery and all these things happening. And I sat down and hadn't said anything about the trailer. And the pastor was about to dismiss, and it was like inside of me, it was like, tell him the prayer request. And I just stood up and I said to the pastor, I said, Pastor, can I leave a prayer request before? And so he said, sure. And I just said, look, and I kind of gave what I've said to you as quick as I could. And I just said, just pray. I said, God's going to do this, and I don't know how it's going to happen, and I don't know when it's going to happen. And they wanted to take up an offering. I'm like, look, there was like 15 people sitting there, adults and some kids. And I'm like, look, you took up an offering this morning, and I appreciate it. I don't come here for your money. Mm-hmm. And I said, no. I said, no, you don't have to take up an offering tonight. And I said, God's going to do this. And anyway, so we're walking out of the church, and the pastor's wife grabbed me by the arm as I'm about to go out the door. She said, come here, I've got something for you over here. And I turn and look, and I see the checkbook out on the desk. And I said, I told, we know these folks and they're friends. And I said, look, you didn't take up an offering, and I'm certainly not taking money from the church's treasury. Yeah. But thank you, but no thank you. And she looked at me, she said, you'll want this. And I'm like, okay. And I stepped in there, and she pointed at a family, and she said, that family just wrote a check for $5,000. And they said, use this for the trailer. And so I, of course, obviously went over there in tears and hugged them. And I said, guys, I don't even know what to say. And so we left from there. And, of course, everywhere else I went, I started telling folks, I said, I need to talk to somebody about a trailer. You know somebody at Wheels and Deals and Trailers, new, used, whatever. I just need to talk to somebody. Mm-hmm. And we're speaking at a little church down in Lafayette. And there's a family in there who's been out to see us twice and brought work teams. And they've done phenomenal stuff out there for us. And there is an end to this story, I promise you.
You're good.
Anyway, so that night, I'm just sharing stories about the out there and stuff, and then I mentioned the trailer, and I just said, hey, if you know somebody, I need to talk to somebody. And for some reason, I described the trailer. I said, when I saw it in my mind, it's a 16-foot cargo trailer, and I said it's 7-8 feet wide. It's 7 feet tall, so you don't feel like you're going to bump your head. And I said it has the ramp door. I said all of that stuff. I didn't look at that family that had been out there, and while I was describing it. And after church, the lady said, could y'all come by our house on your way home? And it was on the way, just about a mile from the church. And so I... it was late, and I was tired, and I'm like, okay. And they, and they're just generous folks, and they always want to give us stuff, and they do this yard sale stuff and some estate sale things, and we pull up, and sure enough, they got stuff on the carport. And my truck's already full, and I'm like, and she said, if you see something, take it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay. And I didn't want to tell her, our truck's full, but I didn't want to be unkind and you're gracious. And anyway, but she said, but that's not why we said, you see that trailer over there? And I looked at it, and when I looked at it, it's kind of in the dark, and it looked shorter than I thought, and then even not just 7 feet tall, and just stuff. And I'm like, okay. And I'm trying to figure out in my mind, if I'm about to buy this trailer, how do I make it work? And so anyway, and she said, when you were preaching, when you were sharing, and you described the trailer, she said, my husband and I sitting together, she said, when you said 16-foot trailer, I turned and looked at him. He wouldn't look at me. He just looking straight ahead. And then you said, so wide and 7 feet tall. And I turned and looked at him again, and he wouldn't look at me, but I saw his eyeball looking out the corner of his eye at me. And then you said the ramp door becomes a patio, and said I just turned around and looked at him and said he wouldn't look at me. And I could see his eyeball looking at me, but he wouldn't turn his head, and said, and he was grinning. And after you dismissed and we stood up, and I said to him, this is why we've had this trailer for a year. It's brand new, never been used. And it's everything that we said. And went over to look at it, and I was just amazed. And you know, and I was about to say, well, we've got, you know, we can give you this much for it, you know, towards it. And before I got a syllable out of my mouth, she said, it's yours. Take it. No cost. And they've been trying to sell it for 4 months, I think she said. And
It's amazing.
And it's an $8,000 trailer.
Yeah.
It was that's what it cost them. They plans that fell through. They thought they were going to do something. It's everything that we described, everything to the T, except it has the window on the side, like if you were selling food or, you know, at a venue.
Right.
And I opened it all up, and I pictured being on the patio, and I thought, because it's so hot out there, that just the breeze, any breeze that would come through that and make things better. But anyway, to say all that, just to say, you know, and I even went back to the people that gave the check, and I said, look, I can't buy the trailer because they gave it to us, and we had it at their church that night, and they were all amazed about it. And I said, would it be okay if we use that money to put the stuff in it we need? And they're like, well, duh, yeah. So anyway, we're excited. You know, we're leaving Monday morning. This is Friday, and, you know, we're leaving Monday morning and excited. I can't wait to get back. And our truck is smaller than the big one we used to have pulling a trailer. And everybody's like, can you pull this trailer? Well, I've been pulling it for the past few days, and it's all good. We're doing great. And so just pray for us that we're able to, and we want to make this as nice, I mean, just luxury kind of a thing, to say to these guys on the street that this is how much God cares about you, and that this is yours. This is your place. And now, you know, they're going to be drinking. And how do you have a conversation? Well, you do, and they get to take a shower. There's a bathroom there. Here's food. Here's clothes. You know, there's going to be closets full of new underwear and socks and toothbrushes, and all that stuff's going to be there. But you know, how do you have a conversation that says, you know what, I know you're drinking a little today, and you know, or a lot today, and you can take a shower, and you can, all this is for you, and you're going to walk away with some stuff and your full belly, and we're going to talk, but you know what, think about it. You want your life to end like this, or can you come back tomorrow or next week or whenever you come back through here and think about that you're drinking less the next time you come, and then the next time even less. It's because I want you to remember the words that Jesus loves you and he died for you, so you don't have to die like this, and you can know him. That's my prayer.
So good. So good. Do you have any other questions, thoughts, Pastor Rhonda?
I don't have any thoughts, or questions. I'm just kind of lost in thought. It's a lot to process. Yeah.
So good.
I think we underestimate what God can do.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Yeah, we underestimate. And I'm just working on a sermon for Psalm 37 for tomorrow. And it's like when we commit our way to him, that's when he fulfills these desires of our heart that, you know, when we delight in him, that we didn't even know we had. And it's for his glory, and he's getting the glory for this.
Absolutely.
So good.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's a phrase that I started to bring it today, but I have a fishing vest, and I've worn it almost every time I've preached since we've been here, and I had printed on the back of it a heat set kind of a thing that I designed. It says, because of Jesus. And underneath that it says, any questions? And I have a cap that the any questions part didn't come to me, but I put across this cap, because of Jesus. And that's going to be on the side of the trailer. And I'm looking, I hope there's some kind of way I can get an email address and, you know, and stuff with that kind of thing, you know, because of Jesus on it. But, you know, that I know some of these guys or others are just going to say, why are you doing this? why are you going to this amount of trouble for us, And, my answer will be, you didn't read the sign.
Yeah.
You didn't see the vest or the cap. It's because of Jesus. That's it. That's the love of Christ compels us. And that's what breaks my heart for people. And of course, my fear is that there's a lot of folks sitting in churches that ain't, talking, and they're talking about heaven, but they ain't going. And that scares me. But the idea, though, of the fact that, anything we think, say, and do. I mean, Romans 8:28 and 29, all things work together for the good of them that love God and to those that are called according to his purpose. And our problem is we look at verse 28 and we forget about verse 29 for a minute, or never look at it. And bad things happen in our lives. And it's like, God, why are you doing this to me? Well, read verse 29. I'm using all of this to mold and shape you to the image of my son. I wish somebody had said that to a 10-year-old Roger. That's your life. You're not being saved from hell. People, why are you what are you saved from? Well, for my sins? No. We're being saved from the wrath of God that's coming on this world and everybody someday. And so we've been delivered from that, and he's took our death. I don't understand this, but in Ephesians it says that when he got up out of the grave, we got up with him. Now, I wasn't there, but apparently I was. And one day that'll all totally make sense. But the only life we have is his life, and he's living his life in us, changing us from the inside out, because we didn't become perfect the minute we got saved, but and that he's working on us. But if we're not learning, number one, that he's doing that, and if you're not discipling people or not being discipled, you're not learning that like that quickly, that as we could have, but that he has taken even the very difficult, bad things happening in our life, and he's using every one of them to mold and shape us to the image of his son. The good that he was talking about in verse 28 is that we're becoming like Jesus, because there's none good but God, and so he's using all of that. And so, and again, it doesn't mean everybody has to move 1,550 miles to New Mexico and sell their house. And there was no sacrifice on our part in doing that. I mean, God, the love of Christ compelled us to do that. And again, it's not because I'm good, because I'm not apart from him. But you know what? There's grandparents that will listen to this someday, and they think they have no ministry. You got a grandchild like I was 9-year-old Roger in a trailer park in Lakeview. Go get your grandkids and bring them.
Yep.
But then talk about Jesus to them and live Jesus in front of them. That's another problem. You got people who talk about him and then they live like, well, anyway. And it's be a Bible friend, and that you may be the parent. Be a Bible friend to your kids, to your spouse, to your grandkids, to your parents, to your siblings, to your neighbor. Somebody talked about going, we ought to go. I want people to come out and see the children's home, and that's a missions trip, and y'all can come do some stuff. And when you talk about doing mission work, and my answer to that now is this: go on a missions trip. But that might be walking next door to your neighbor's house or across the street or to that coworker or whoever. We miss that. And we think we got to go overseas or we got to go to New Mexico or no. Anyway, this is a life God's called us to. He said, if you're following me, I'll make you fishers of men.
That's right.
And the missing element of seeing that really happening with the majority of church attending people over my lifetime scares me. Because where's the Holy Spirit? I've watched people hate people for being a different color, for not speaking English. I've watched church folks hate people. And I'm like, of course, the one verse from 1 John, how can we say we love God whom we've not seen if we can't love our brother whom we have seen? And that makes all the difference.
Well, it's just so exciting, once again, just to hear somebody doing something that is just kind of very, very much beyond them. And, I'm really excited for a lot of the plans that he has. And I haven't really said this, I guess, in these episodes here, but this is my uncle, and I'm very, very proud of him, and for where he is at and where God has brought him. He is such an inspiration for me in my life, and it was hard for me. It wasn't hard. It was great for me to be here and sitting across the table from him, but there was just so many times for me that, I couldn't help but just start crying, at these stories of God's goodness and God's faithfulness. And so I'm very, very proud as a nephew, to have this example in my life of my uncle, as he has pushed beyond himself. And, we're not a part of the same denomination. He's Baptist and we're Nazarene. But man, it's, just to hear him talking about discipleship and what discipleship is, it just reassures me of the reality that heaven's going to be a lot bigger than I think we give him credit for. And the call for us is to disciple people. And man, what just great messages all throughout that we heard for this whole podcast of God's goodness and faithfulness. It was such a joy for me.
I totally enjoyed it, and I agree. One thing that I really loved about this is that he is a regular pastor. It's not like he has a huge following of popularity. He's not like a best-selling author with a bunch of books on how to make disciples. He's just a regular guy that God called, like he said, from a child out of a trailer park and into, the fold, into the family of God, and was called into ministry. And he's pastored at regular, normal churches, and he's just a regular guy, and that brings hope because I'm just a regular girl, and God has called all of us to make disciples. And he just inspired me to just think about things differently, like how to be a thermostat and not the temperature, and how to just take advantage of conversations and be that Bible friend. Anybody, anywhere can do this. It doesn't mean that God's going to send you to New Mexico, but right where you are, you can have conversations. It's not weird to talk about our faith in Jesus. It's not something that we do on Sunday mornings. It's just our life. It's who we are. It's how we go about things. And it's not at all awkward. It shouldn't be. Talk about Jesus. And so I'm just inspired. And then, of course, another issue that's close to my heart is racial reconciliation. And when he was speaking of that, he was when it was the first an issue, it was more of a black/white kind of a thing. Right. But now in our day, we're still seeing that, and we're seeing all kinds of racial prejudice with brown skin, and just we could go on and on and on. Yeah. But I love how he just has a heart to see people as made in the image of God, and they're just human beings that God loves, and it's our responsibility to love people and not judge them for color or stay away, keep them at an arm's distance, just because of the difference in skin color. And so that meant a lot to me. But my favorite thing was just he's a regular guy doing God's work, and man, that is so inspiring for all of us. We're in the same boat.
Yeah, so good. The question just keeps ringing in my brain ever since we've done this interview of whose church is this? And it all goes back to that, because at the end of the day, I think we've got to ask ourselves, especially when it comes to this discipleship thing, is who do we belong to? Like who has ownership of our life? Who has ownership of our possessions? Who has ownership of everything that we have? And if we can't truly say, hey, this is God's, then we're not going to be able to live this discipleship life. But that's the mentality we have to approach this with. And if we really, really want to make a difference in the world around us, if we want to be able to experience stories of God's goodness and faithfulness and his continued journey, then we've got to give God everything that we have. And we've got to realize that the call that he gives us is to love him and then love our neighbor. And if we're really, really going to love our neighbor, it's got to be more than just, oh, hey, how's it going? It's got to be, we've got to get in the dish with people. We've got to journey with people. We've got to love people. And that is what is just dripping all over this story. Like you said, it's a regular guy who says, God, everything that I have, it belongs to you. I want you to do whatever you desire with it. Use me, God, however you desire to use me. And God, I just want to be faithful with what you have given me. And all of us, like you said, all of us can get to a place where we're willing to do that. And man, if we do that, the world's going to be a whole lot better of a place, because how can we love Jesus if we can't even love our brothers and sisters who are hurting and who are in need? Such a good way to end the podcast, such a good way to end this, the reality of discipleship. And man, our hope and prayer is that you have enjoyed this conversation as much as we have, that you've been challenged by this conversation just as much as we have, and that you'll continue to chew on this and continue to allow it to affect you, and that you'll go back and you'll listen, to certain parts and allow it to transform you, not because of Roger Kittle and who Roger is, but because of Jesus and what Jesus is doing through Roger's life. And man, we love these conversations. If you enjoy these conversations, just let us know. We want to keep on having conversations like this. But know that we love you. Know that we are praying for you during this time. And know that, man, you're not alone in this thing called following Jesus. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just in case you might be new to our podcast, we do have a Facebook page. You can reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Also an email. Our email address is growinghopelivingfaith@gmail.com. And we have a Facebook page. It's Growing Hope Living Faith Podcast. So if you're new to us, thank you for listening, and we would love to hear from you. That's
right. Thank you, everybody. Man, we love you. God loves you. And we'll try to get some more information out to you if you want to try to follow Roger Kittle's, his story, and to continue to follow his journey. We'll try to get some resources out there for you so that you can kind of continue on that journey with him. Know that we love you all. Grace and peace. God bless. Bye-bye.